For the first time in a while, Boston College has added quite a bit of depth, and with that depth should come some great battles for starting spots on the roster.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 Network. I've been covering Boston College for over a decade. If you're looking for Boston College news, analysis, and details on your Eagles, you are in the right place. Locked On BC is a free daily Boston College podcast available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Mazda. We put that same drive into every detail, wins define the moment, putting in that work that defines you. Stay tuned for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. On today's show, we're going to talk about they need a new offensive coordinator. Could it be internal? We've thought it will be. What kind of game plan should they be putting together with the offense that they have in front of them? And additionally, we're going to talk about all the new transfers and what kind of positional battles we're going to be seeing once spring football starts in about a month. So let's kick that off. BC is now, after the addition of Alex DeGreek, is up to 27 commitments and signees. They're actually signees because they're all on campus, except for DeGreek, for transfers for this upcoming class. And most of these guys that you brought in, are going to be battling for starting jobs. When you're in the portal, you're going to get a few. You've got, the defensive tackle from Colorado and Johnny Norwood. Those types of guys probably know that they're going to be more of a reserve type of players as they continue to grow. Same thing with, Grayson Wilson, unless he really balls out at camp. But up and down the roster now, you have incumbents that played last year, and you have transfers that have come in that are going to try to unseat them. So I'm looking forward to a number of different battles coming up in the next, 6 months to see who picks up this offense, this defense, and who earns that role of being the starter at that spot. Now, one of the big positions I think that's going to have a lot of battles is that offensive line. BC brought in 6 offensive linemen. They lost quite a few. And you're bringing back Michael Krauts and Robert Smith, who have basically played. Everyone else is question marks. And you brought in a number of offensive linemen who have experience. You look at a guy, for instance, like Reggie Jackson, I'm going to call him Mr. September. I guess he could be Mr. October, from Jacksonville State, a 6'7" offensive tackle, played all of last year. You have to imagine he's going to be the tackle on this roster, right? Like he's going to be a starting tackle. But are there going to be other tackles that could beat him out? Like you brought in, Juju Vigeur from Tennessee State. He's a big dude, and he's got a high upside. Could he beat him out? Or what about Trayvon Humphrey from NC Central? I look at that tackle spot, and now there's a number of names that could get that. No, I don't want to say I expect it, but I'm curious to see if Pape Sai will be getting one of those starting jobs. But the interesting part of all of this, when you're talking about building the depth chart and rebuilding it with transfers, is you have to, when you're looking at the offensive line, also discuss that they have a new offensive line coach, a new set of eyes that are going to look at guys differently than you did with Matt Applebaum. Kurt Andersen, he's going to have his style. He's going to have things that he's looking for that may be different than what we were expecting. Like you don't want to just assume because the guy was on the 2 deep and he was, the number 2 last year, that he's going to immediately start this year. Andersen may watch and say, Reggie Jackson's doing this. I like that. And at the guard position, I'm really interested in Owen Snively from Eastern Michigan because he seems to be doing something, and I'm going to start him over Robert Smith. All 5 positions, I think I would even put center on there, are up for grabs when it comes to spring camp. You have a number of different options. You have a number of permutations and guys that are able to flex in at different spots. You can move them inside. You can move them outside. So it's a cop out answer. I'm gonna live up to this right now. I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm copping out when it comes to the offensive line, but I think all 5 spots are going to be position battles. At the center position, I want to say Snively is one that has played center before, but you look at some of the other spots like Christian Phillips from, or I think they call him Big Chris from Michigan State. Yeah, he's been hurt a bunch, but he may be one of your marquee transfers if he can stay healthy. Like you take away everything else. You know, lots of times when you're in the portal, you're going to have a handful of guys in the portal. They're not a lot out there. You know, there's a good. I mean, let's be real. There's a decent chunk out there that are with what they are and they're good. Like, you know, Reed Harris and Turbo Richards who left. But the other groups that you get out there are guys that, you know, may have a wart. And for Phillips, the injuries are the wart. The big key with him is if he stays healthy, you got something good there. That's the big key right there. Like you have something really, really good. So the offensive line, you got, you know, the Pape size, the Michael Crounces and Robert Smith. And hey, I'll throw even Judah Pruitt in there, battling against all these new transfers in with a new set of eyes watching them. So that's one position that I will be watching for. The second position is the edge rusher. And this one's going to be really interesting because you didn't lose a ton of depth in the portal. You lost Edward Kalengi and Jaden Fry. Kalengi was, you know, a valuable veteran, didn't do a whole lot in terms of pass rush. And then but you have all the guys you brought in quite a few last year, whether it was Elo Boykin, Favor Bate, Anye Nuisi, even freshmen like Israel Oladapopu. Like you brought in a whole bunch of, they're all still there. How is it going to look if these guys start to develop? Like I am very interested. I keep mentioning these two, Elo Boykin. I mean, I'll see if they say 3, Elo Boykin, Favor Bate, and Favor Israel Oladapopu. Those are 3 that I've been watching quite a bit because I think they're going to be guys that their ceiling can keep getting higher and higher. I'm not saying they're going to be superstars, but they intrigue me from what they can do. If they continue to go higher and higher, will they grab those starting spots and hold off the Demetrius Ballard, Kris Jones, and Alex DeGreeks that are coming in? That's an interesting plot to watch for. Because if Kris Jones is what he was as a blue chip recruit, yeah, he's got the highest upside of anybody. Like, you know, you got a top 125 recruit here, blue chip that had, you know, it was set to play for Georgia. Like, if he can do what he's supposed to do, he's gonna play. Then you got someone like Demetrius Ballard, who may be a little bit more raw, but he's 6'6". And you know, the film shows that in the limited snaps that he has, he's playing at he's playing FBS football. It's not like he's coming up from D2. He looks pretty good. So you have all of these different players out there. Again, it's going to be who's picking up, and for me, the explosiveness. I think that is going to be the key. Which edge rusher can be the most explosive and give you that pass rush that you so badly need in one-to-one matchups? That was the piece that was missing last year. You did not have an edge rusher that could win their one-to-one matchups. So that's the big key with the guys that are coming back, right? Can Boykin get to that level? He's certainly started to show pieces of that. Oladapopu is young. Can he do it? Or is it going to be one of these transfers? That's going to be the positional battle. And one where, like right now, you can't say who the starter is going to be because we don't know. We have no clue, right? So that's going to be a positional battle that we're going to be watching for. In a moment, I'm going to stick to the defensive side, and then I'm going to go back to the offense. I have a few thoughts on a couple battles there. We'll get into those in just a moment. The winter games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for events. You only get to see the biggest stage every 4 years. I love bobsled. Hey, Jamaica's got a bobsled team again this year. And, skiing, it's all great to watch. That's why following the winter games on FanDuel makes it just that much more sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sport you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. Like speed skating races that they're decided by inches. FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. There's so many different sports, so many different options that you can find on FanDuel. It's your imagination is the limit. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow than on FanDuel. With FanDuel, play your game. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert start to finish without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it for you. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit turbotax.com/local to book your appointment today. Locked on Boston College. Folks, again, I have been doing bonus episodes and what I call my first cup with AJ Black, where I do a relaxed fit episode of Locked on BC with things that are going on with BC, my thoughts on stuff. I get real raw, real deep. And if you like your Locked on BC, you need to become part of our everyday all access tier where you get that. You get texting with me. You get all sorts of goodies. And with the weekend full of sports, it's going to be a lot of fun. So make sure you sign up today. The link are in the show notes. So we're talking positional battles here. As the portal has closed and BC now has a hopefully deeper roster than they did 2 months ago. And staying on the defensive side of the ball, one position is going to have to change drastically, and that's the linebacker position. You lost Owen McGowan, Davion Crouch, Jalen Blackwell, and Bryce Steele, all to either the graduation or the transfer portal. That basically is all of your snaps. You have Griffin Collins remaining, and someone like Zachary Thomas, Falahe Po'oa, and Kamori Dixon, younger guys that could jump in as well. Of all them, the most we've seen so far is Collins, and he's looked good in patches, but he's raw too. Like these guys are all raw. And you brought in some more established players, guys like Anthony Polano from Washington State, Bodie Cahoun from Notre Dame, and then most recently Justin Medlock of SMU. Now, if you got a chance to read Mitch Wolf's scouting report on Medlock on Eagle Insider, I'll give you a little taste of it. He talks about how Medlock is a very good pass coverage linebacker, but he's not meant to be he's not going to be the guy, if that's what you're looking for, right? He might get exposed more if you have him out there as like you did with Owen McGowan last year. Like he's a much more of a role player. So if they're much more multiple on how they do things, you might see all of these linebackers out there. But I'm curious who the linebacker is that they lean on hardest next year. And, there's no easy answer. It could be Polano, but, I think his upside, you haven't seen enough of it yet. Bodie Cahoun seems like he's a very interesting option for BC, but he hasn't played at all other than on special teams. Maybe he jumps in. I've heard, talking to Notre Dame people, he's the best athlete that they had in the linebacker room, but just hadn't had a chance to play because he's behind a whole bunch of NFL players. So I look at those guys, I look at what they have, and to me, this mixture shows me that there's going to be some real positional battles going on this spring. Guys really pushing to get that spot because Griffin Collins, he got a taste of what it's like to start last year. He got a chance to play multiple snaps, and I'm sure he would be a great fit if he's ready to go. Zachary Thomas, we talk about him just a bit here on the show, but we should talk about him more. because he wasn't part of this class. He was the class before. He didn't play much last year, but I know from things I've heard, he was one guy that the staff was really excited about to get at linebacker last year. And so now that he's in year 2, I think he's a sophomore because I think he played 4 games. Will he jump up and become an exciting defensive player for BC? That remains to be seen. And how much of these new transfers are going to kind of jump in and take these snaps? Like, are we going to see more of Medlock as Thomas still continues to develop and maybe, he sees more limited play? Or do we see Medlock play more like the role of Bryce Steele last year, where Bryce Steele only played a handful of snaps? It's a good question, and it's the type of battle that Dan O'Brien and Ted Roof are going to have to kind of settle out and see what they got here. If I was a betting man, if I was to bet, I think you're going to see quite a bit of Medlock. I think he's going to play quite a bit. I think you're going to see quite a bit of Polano. And then it's going to be some combination of the other. To me, it's a bunch of all those other guys. They all could win it. Whether it's Cahoun, Dixon, Fahoa, those types of guys, they're all going to get that chance to jump up and start. So it's going to be that in terms of positional battle will be one of the more interesting ones I think of. Then going back to the offense, you go back to the wide receiver position. You have a bunch of wide receivers now that are going to be looking to start, and there's different positives and negatives to all of them that makes it interesting to see which one rises to the top. You lost your top 2 wideouts, right? Reed Harris, Lewis Bond, they're both gone. You need other guys to step up. Obviously, to me, the one that I keep saying this, last year at camp, the name that I kept talking about was Jaedn Skeete. You guys are probably like, why? You keep bringing him up. Because if he stays healthy, he's very good. He's really, really good. He just has had real issues with staying healthy. And he will be the top guy. I mean, he's already practicing. They show pictures of him at not practice, at working out. So he's getting there, right? He will have that chance. Other guys coming back include Dawson Pough. He played a lot of snaps last year. I'd imagine he's going to have a really good shot. I know the staff is very high on him. You have VJ Wilkins, who I'm curious of where he kind of sits and everything, because it was really interesting that you went from the spring where he was everywhere to he was nowhere. Injuries could have conflicted, maybe just wasn't playing the right role. I don't know. He could be something. Then you got guys that you don't think about and that could very much jump up. One name that for me that I'm just curious to see where he ends up is Jonathan Montague. Jonathan Montague blew his knee out last year during the spring and missed all of last year. I'm not sure how healthy he's going to be for spring ball, but I imagine, 12 months he'll be back for the summer. And if you remember correctly, 2 years ago and 3 years ago when Hafley was here, they were talking about how he was one of the best athletes they had on the team. So he played in 2024. You didn't get to see him last year. How healthy he is and how quickly he picks up Bill O'Brien's offense will be an interesting factor for them, because I wonder if he will be a name that we see. And then, I mentioned Dawson Pough. What about Nedrick Bolden, who didn't play at all last year? That's Anquan Bolden's nephew, or cousin, excuse me. He's his cousin. We haven't seen him at all. I think they wanted to redshirt him and save that year. Curious to see him, because I thought he, again, looked pretty good during practices at times last year. So those are the guys that you have. You lost a whole bunch, but you have some names there. Then you bring in some names like a Landon Wright from Wazoo or Javarius Green from UNC. Interesting names to watch for in terms of just their speed and athleticism. The two of them are names I would really keep an eye on in practice reports, because I think those two, in terms of filling what Lewis Bond did last year, are going to be names that are going to be in that mix a lot. Reed Swanson is interesting because clearly they really like him, because he had a ton of catches last year for Colgate. I'm a little skeptical because it's Colgate, but he's 6'6". That's height and talent. And watching him just bodying FCS cornerback cornerbacks over and over again. It's kind of interesting. And he bodied a bunch of Syracuse guys too. There's something there with him. Curious where he falls into all of this. Then you have Jackson Wade, who I think caught a lot of attention because of some of the clips he had, because some of those practice clips were nuts. So you got all these different names who, when it all kind of fizzles to the top, who is the cream of the crop? Who are the guys that are going to get those? Because last year, BC had a number of wide receivers. Even when Skeete was hurt, they really relied heavily on Pough, Harris, and Bond. Those three were the guys that you saw from most of that season. You saw a little sprinkle of Luke McLaughlin or VJ Wilkins here or there, but it was just Pough, Harris, and Bond from 3/4 of the year. I imagine O'Brien would love to have more flexibility and guys that can do different things, but we're going to have to wait to see what that looks like. So those are some big positional battles. I think that, once we get more and more into camp, we'll start to see more. There's other things you could think of too, like, get the punter from, what was it? Not Wagner. What school is he from? Bryce LaFollette from Towson versus Andy Quinn. There'll be other positional battles. These are the ones that just stood out to me, and mostly because there's so many different options. There's no clear answer just from my perspective of who it could be. So that's my thoughts. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Throw them in the comment section. I'd love to hear what you had to say. If you haven't checked it out already, go back. I did an episode with Mike Sidley on basketball. We've been doing extra shows here. We did a 15-minute show on like everything going on with basketball. You need to check that out. It's on the podcast feed. In a moment, we still don't have an offensive coordinator, but I have thoughts on what this offense really needs to look like if it's going to be successful in 2026.
I'm Kalia Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot, celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. Dawn Staley and South Carolina remain on top of the SEC standings after handing Tennessee their worst defeat in program history with a final score of 93-40. In the 43-point win, South Carolina shot 69% from the field. Tessa Johnson had a perfect shooting night, scoring 24 points, shooting 4 for 4 from the floor, including 2 threes, and made all 4 of her free throws. And UCLA remains undefeated in Big Ten play, topping Michigan 69-66 as Player of the Year contender Lauren Betts put up a double-double, scoring 16 points, collecting 16 rebounds, and adding 5 assists and 3 blocks. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes, and coming back for more every time. Mazda puts the same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment, putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
Wrapping things up here at Locked On Boston College, AJ Black here. If you're looking for a second listen, go back. I've been doing so much content this week. Go back over our channel. There's tons of different shows. Most of them are evergreen, so check them out. You'll enjoy talks on baseball, basketball, hockey, more football talk. It's all back there. Don't poo-poo the old stuff because it's good stuff out there, only on the Locked On Boston College feed. Now, for our final segment of the week, it's time to talk BC basketball. BC basketball, hockey. No, football. Football, AJ. Slow your brain down for a second. There's no offensive coordinator yet. But I continue to think the reason there hasn't been an offensive coordinator named yet is because I think most of it's going to go internally. Regardless of all of that, I've been thinking philosophy, what this offense needs to be. And I've said over and over again in past episodes, with the new additions of Femi Babalola, Grayson Wilson, and Mason McKenzie, you need to change the offense, because if you do what you did for Dylan Larnagin and force Tommy Castellanos and Grayson James to do, it's not going to work. You specifically brought in quarterbacks who are athletes. You look at Mason McKenzie. He's a guy that ran for almost 1,000 yards last year. He can run. If you force him into the pocket and stay in the pocket, you're asking for trouble. You need to rely more on his legs, let him improvise, and do things that keeps defenses on their toes. This is a great problem to have. He may not have the best arm. I've heard his arm's better than you may think. It may not be the best arm, but letting him do things, picking up first downs with his legs, designed runs, RPOs, things like that you didn't see a whole lot of with Dylan Larnagin, is going to make this offense much fresher, much less predictable, and much more explosive. You look at what BC has. The difference between last year and this year, the strength of last year was their wide receivers. You had Lewis Bond and Reed Harris, two excellent wide receivers, so you could pass the ball. And you look at what you have this year, wide receivers is a little bit more of a question mark. It may end up being fine, but you're not going to have. I have a hard time thinking that you're going to have someone who could do what Lewis Bond did. So, what do? You run the ball. You make your quarterback, move and do things with his legs, and you keep things fresh by doing some, a little misdirection and things. Make the defense's eyes go in different places. That's what I love about mobile quarterbacks. Look, I'm a Pats fan. Drake May does a great job with this kind of stuff. Having defenses not know where the ball is and not know what the quarterback is going to do with the ball keeps defenses more off balance, unless the Seattle Seahawks and they just tee off on you all game. But that's a whole other story. But I look at what this offensive coordinator is going to need to do is you need to figure out how to use Mason McKenzie's assets more. He needs to run. He needs to run a lot. And that's going to be such a change from last year. What's really funny is from everything I look at and everything I read, the offense that they need to put together for Mason McKenzie should have been the offense they put for Tommy Castellanos a couple years ago. If they had thought about it, and I don't know what their reasons were, but I would have made Tommy, like that's what Halfley did well with Castellanos. Castellanos wasn't a perfect quarterback. So what did he do? He let him run the football a lot. McKenzie needs to do some of that, but with a tinge of what makes Bill O'Brien's offenses more effective, which is short passes, quick reads, things like that. A combo of all of that should make the offense more effective. And you won't be seeing mesh rail every other third play. So that's always fun. Well, thank you all for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed today's show. If you did, please like and subscribe to our channel. Please like my channel in general. Follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. Check me out on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and more. And I hope you become part of our All Access Club. I think you'll enjoy the content that I'm putting out there as well. Thank you all for joining me, and I'll see you again tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Boston College, your team every day.